Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato, who is now officially a media member after getting a video of the Malik Nabers touchdown in practice today that went viral a little bit. Sports Update tweeted it, credited Nick. I saw that. The Giants having their second practice against the Detroit Lions in preparation for the preseason game. We don't, unless you could tell me otherwise, Nick, have any clear indication on who will and won't play in this preseason game. We have expectations and assumptions, but no affirmative or no confirmation, I should say.
Dan Campbell said something about how don't expect a lot of those guys who are first teamers, especially the stars, to get a lot of snaps. I'm going to imagine Brian Dable's going to follow suit there. We're probably not going to see much Daniel Jones, Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence. We hardly have seen Dexter Lawrence in team periods in these joint practices. So I'm expecting a lot of second team and third team guys, and there's going to be a lot of final roster spots that will be fought for through this first preseason game. Maybe we'll see a little bit more of them in the second preseason game against
usually Houston. That used to be like the fourth preseason game was that roster spot preseason game with all the third teamers. Now everything's been kind of flipped on its head preseason wise. A lot of teams don't play their starters almost at all in the preseason. The third game used to be a big starters game. Now that's not the case. The second game is now kind of that game, but the starters don't even really play that much in that game. So preseason's kind of become a glorified walkthrough, I feel like, for the regular season, which, you know, some will argue is probably why the product isn't as great at the beginning of the season, but others will say, look, no injuries is the main thing that we should be focused on. I will be looking out to see if Nabers plays. I would hope that he doesn't play if Jones doesn't play. I don't really see too much value to running him out there with Locke personally. I think he's already showed he can play at this level, but if he's going to build a rapport with Jones, I'm happy to have him out there. Same thing goes for Dex and Thomas. No interest in having them play at all personally in the preseason. Maybe the snaps for Thomas that Jones plays. But as far as the practices go, let's start with your biggest takeaway from the second Giants-Lions joint practice.
I watched the offensive one-on-ones and the Giants offense against the Detroit Lions defense to start, and then I went and joined Ed and everybody else for red zone team period. They're on two different fields, so there's kind of a lot of moving around, and there was a little bit of a transit period for me. But my initial impression is just, firstly, the New York Giants were able to compete in two consecutive practices with the Detroit Lions. I don't think they were as impressive as possibly the last practice, but I don't think that's also really a slight or an indictment on the New York Giants. It's Malik Nabers. That's the real impression. This guy is unguardable. Every time I saw Malik Nabers aligned outside the numbers in a one-on-one matchup, I was like, let me get my phone out and videotape this, because the football more than likely is going to be targeted to Malik Nabers. So that's a credit to Daniel Jones for recognizing the one-on-one matchups and just throwing the football up in the air to your star wide receiver. That's Malik Nabers. Now for defense, I didn't have too much of my eyes on it other than the red zone drills. I took a lot of notes away from Ed. It just seems like Brian Burns was kicking ass in one-on-one snaps and in team period, which also goes back to last practice. He ended up going down with an ankle injury, got it taped up, and returned to the field. But it's these two additions by the New York Giants in the offseason, Brian Burns on the defense, first-round draft pick Malik Nabers, that are the most critical players in these two joint practices with the Detroit Lions. And that's not a mistake. That is also exciting. There are some other issues we'll get into here in a little bit, but Burns and Malik Nabers, they're going to be true difference makers for this team.
Yeah, and we talked earlier this offseason about how we both felt pretty strongly that trading out Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney, two players who, you know, one is relying at times on the offensive line. That goes for every running back in the NFL. The other is off the ball, not involved in every play, versus two guys who are involved in every play, Malik Nabers and Brian Burns. You could be damn sure that Malik Nabers, even when the ball isn't coming his way, is involved on every play, because defenses are going to start to take notice of him, that they would play a bigger role in helping the Giants win games. And I do strongly feel that they're going to contribute more than those other two would have contributed. Not to say you couldn't have gotten Nabers and re-signed one of those two. Two scares in practice. One was the Brian Burns ankle, and then two was Malik Nabers, who went down with a shoulder injury on a red zone drill, popped back up and got back in a few plays later. Everything seems to be fine there, but definitely scary. But let's start with Malik Nabers here, because we do feel pretty strongly right now that he is going to be a difference maker in year one for the Giants. I read that he was targeted like in a absurd amount in the 7-on-7 drills and 11-on-11 drills combined from Jordan Ronan. And that just goes to show the Giants are really committed to getting him the football. I think we're at a point where two things are working for the Giants, because I saw one stacked release play, Nick, where the Giants had a really nice design to get Nabers the ball in space early and have some routes that'll clear out that space. We saw that a few practices ago. I know there was, someone online who was like, Daniel Jones has all this time, he's checking out to Nabers. Well, I was like, no, I'm not in the receiver room, but I can be pretty sure that this play was designed to clear out and create that space to get Nabers the ball, because once he caught the ball on a quote unquote check down, he had a lot of space in front of him to then do his Nabers thing. And we saw that on that play today. We also saw another example of Daniel Jones recognizing the one-on-one before the snap and understanding in the red zone, or I think it was like just outside the 20, that he could just put the ball up there, back shoulder, it looked like, and Nabers will adjust to it and make the catch, because that's just what he does. So now we have situations where if Daniel Jones can locate before the snap a one-on-one situation for Nabers, going to get him the football, and other situations where Daboll's creating these design plays to clear out space for Nabers to get the ball underneath. Both times Nabers is involved, both times Nabers getting the target. And then all the other snaps that we're going to get, hopefully, where Nabers is getting focused on, because these are snaps, of course, where the defense is aligned in a way that will allow those two things to happen. But it's not always going to be one-on-ones for Nabers. And on those plays, hopefully, that's when Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton begin to shine, and Dio Johnson and Daniel Bellinger and whoever else can get in the mix, hopefully Tyrone Tracy. So really, ultimately, Nick, it's a good testament to me to see that he's able to, I don't want to say cook, but create this amount of target share, demand and command these amount of targets, because a good study was done a few years ago, Nick, in the NFL, maybe last year in fantasy football world, that shows that targets are earned. They are not. It's very important to note that a target is based on the wide receiver's ability to separate. It's not all based on the offense's design. So he's earning these targets. He's commanding these targets, and he's doing a lot with these targets against not just Giants DBs, but Lions DBs. Because the whole narrative, Nick, was who cares that Nabers is toasting everyone in practice every day? It's the Giants DBs, and they quote unquote suck. Now it's he's beating Lions DBs.
Yeah, and look, he can come down with these contested catches against most of these defensive backs, because some of this coverage by Tyrion Arnold, like he's lost a couple of reps, but some of the coverage by Arnold hasn't been all that bad. And Malik Nabers is still coming down with the football. And Tyrion Arnold, who Malik Nabers said after practice, he's very close with Tyrion Arnold. They text all the time. It wasn't Tyrion Arnold who ended up fighting Malik Nabers. It was Kirby Joseph. We'll get into that maybe a little bit later. But Malik Nabers is a contested catch maverick. We saw that on tape at LSU, but it wasn't his calling card. That was more of a Rome Odunze thing, right? Like, yeah, he can come down with a contested catch. It's not an indictment on his profile, but it's not something that was the number one thing about Malik Nabers' game. It was more his explosiveness, his ability to create separation, his toughness after the catch. He's coming down with so many contested catches against Deontay Banks, against Tyrion Arnold, against Carlton Davis yesterday. These are quality NFL cornerbacks. So that's something that can at least give Daniel Jones the confidence to say, I really trust this guy. And if I know I have that one-on-one match, I just got to put this football high, and Malik Nabers can leap up and come down with it. And he did that right in front of me in that video that I ended up recording over Tyrion Arnold. Just slid Tyrion Arnold off of his platform, attacked his leverage a little bit, got him to open his hips inside, and then got him to throw his outside hand to jam, and promptly Malik Nabers just went right outside, right around him, and then gained leverage. And you just saw that Tyrion Arnold cannot make up this space, and the ball was thrown catchable. Malik Nabers ended up coming down with it. This is going to be a big part of the offense when they are attacking vertical. And like you've said, like we've said so many times, they're going to roll coverage his way, opens up opportunity for other people. Hopefully that opens up opportunity for the rushing attack as well. And
one thing you mentioned, and I saw this in your breakdown on Big Blue View of practice, is one thing that we talked about a lot in his profile when we did a whole hour on him pre-draft, and then obviously discussed him after the Giants drafted Malik Nabers. The one thing that we did kind of want to see a little bit more of is how is he going to deal with NFL corners and press man and those types of coverages that are going to get up in his face. And I said, like, look, I know he doesn't have a lot of different variety right now, like a Marvin Harrison to his release package, but I said, I watched Antonio Brown have basically no variety in his release package and be unguardable off the line of scrimmage because of his speed release. And I think Malik Nabers is going to be that exact type of player. I don't think that he's going to need a big variety of release packages personally. We'll see if I'm wrong about that, to create separation against press man in the NFL. We're going to find out, but that speed release, man, that ability with his hips and that just how loose he is. It's a funny word to use, but just that loose flexibility, like flexible is not the word. I don't know what it would be. That hip flexibility, maybe hip mobility is the way to
Yeah.
describe it. And that's probably what it is. It allows him to create those releases off the line of scrimmage and not, in my mind, need to have a variety of moves. Marvin Harrison is a very different build. He's 6'4",
Yeah.
and I kind of feel like he kind of needs a release package. Nabers is very different. You brought up the contested catch. We didn't see it as much at LSU because he was creating a lot more separation because he was going A, against college GPs. I think that's less of it. I think B, it's just mostly just how the college game is designed. There's so much space to the field side. You can just run slot fades and have like tons of room for the ball. But the NFL, like you said, more contested catch opportunities. But I think Jones is building that confidence. And I really am starting to get the feel, man, that Jones is going to have a career year in the NFL for him. And this guy's going to help revive his career because I think he's going to be able to lock onto him. And in other times, we're like, don't lock on, Jones. Don't lock on to your first read. This is one guy where it's like, I'm not so sure if I'm going to be that mad if he's locking on to Malik Nabers and just letting it rip, because we saw Eli do that a lot with Odell in 2014 and 2015, and he found a lot of success doing that. And as you lock on to a receiver like that, you build more of a rapport, a chemistry. We started to see the comeback routes. We started to see the back shoulder stuff with Jones to Nabers all happening in the last 2 practices and beyond that. And that just gets me excited, man. I feel like one thing that's really hurt the Giants over the years is offense, and this may be a cheat code. This may be quarterback friendly. I don't know how else to say it, but just an easy way to create offense.
It could just really open up all the secondary and tertiary options, having an actual star at the wide receiver position. I'm looking forward to the joint practices with the Jets. I want to see Sauce Gardner against Malik Nabers. That's going to be a really fun matchup.
That's actually going to be really interesting. Actually, you know what it reminds me of? In preseason, Hyatt had a really good rep against Sauce Gardner last year. Kind of showed off his ability to sink his hips and then get back up and accelerate. That was fun to watch. Now we're going to get to see in the joint practices Nabers versus him. That's an even more exciting matchup. And I'm sure Sauce Gardner is going to want to play, like that's going to be something that he's excited for too, because everyone's seen the hype at this point with Malik Nabers. Credit the Giants and credit how many people are on the beat and just taking videos of practices versus like all the 31 other teams. But everyone in NFL media that I see on my Twitter is just posting like, it seems like every day we get a Malik Nabers highlight. And maybe it's just the Giants have a lot of people recording video, or maybe it's just this dude is making plays in practice day after day, and maybe Marv Harrison isn't, not to say he's not, or Rome Odunze aren't. Like, who knows versus the other rookies, but it seems like this guy for sure is just continuously making plays.
Yeah, I want to say Jordan Renan had Malik Nabers in team period through the last 2 practices, caught 17 of 18 passes. And the one that he did not catch was the one against Tyrion Arnold along the sideline, close to the sideline, that sparked the fight with Kirby Joseph. And he almost came down with that. Arnold was draped all over Malik Nabers. And Malik Nabers climbed up and almost plucked it out of the air with one hand, fell to the deck, and it ended up rolling on the ground. And then they kind of got up and Malik Nabers dabbed him up. Tyrion Arnold started running back, and Kirby Joseph must have said something to Malik. So Malik shoved him, kind of gave him a little shove to the face, and then Kirby just dropped down and started throwing punches like crazy. And then Malik started throwing punches, and then Devin Singletary ran in there and started boxing, and there was just an entire brawl between both sides. The first hour and a half of practice was pretty damn quiet, Dan. There was no fights on either field. You didn't hear any whoa and everyone running to a side. No, it was none of that. And then after that fight, after that altercation, you had like 3 or 4 other fights, most of them having to do with Kirby Joseph. I saw one with special teams with Isaiah Simmons. I saw Kayvon Thibodeau get into it with Kirby Joseph. And then Theo Johnson ended up taking, I think, Khalil Dorsey or Kirby Joseph and like holding him still. And that basically like ended practice at that point. But yeah, it was a very, very chippy towards the end of practice, carried over from the first joint session yesterday.
Kirby Joseph, enemy and number 1 for the New York Giants fans right now. Feisty player, a player I really liked out of Illinois. Just really good range, deep safety. Showed it off a little bit so far in his NFL career. But I will say this, it was one of my most boomer takes I've ever had, Nick, and I put it on Twitter a little bit earlier. A lot of Giants fans love the fights. I like yesterday's fights, for example. I like them from the standpoint of what some Giants fans and what we discussed yesterday, which is this team has a lot of fight in them, and this team has that intensity. I'm not on the flip side of that. I don't find his fights that aesthetically pleasing personally, and I'm just like not as into watching them as other people are. I like them for the reason, like I said, that shows the team is fighting. But I will say this, as far as my most boomer take goes, Nick, I am out once a wide receiver that means everything to this franchise at this point is throwing punches and potentially connecting on a helmet. I know some people said they're using the soft helmets in practice, yada, yada, yada. I don't care. It's possible that if you throw a punch and it lands wrong, you have a broken hand now or a broken wrist or something like that. And you've gained nothing from this, in my personal opinion. Also, in addition to that, it's possible that if you get in the habit of just throwing hands, you're going to get suspended from a game or kicked out of a game that you might need him for if this happens again in the regular season. So, like, while I do like the fight in them, I don't like the punching. I'd rather just kind of grappling and what we saw more of the other day. So I wonder if that's something Brian Dable and Joe Shane are going to talk about with Neighbors.
Yeah, all it takes is you throwing a punch and connecting by your
Right.
pinky finger's knuckle, connecting on a part that's not padded and then breaking that part of your hand. And there are so many bones in your hand. And if that did happen, that'd be devastating. I want to say it happened to Andre Johnson.
It did happen, Andre Johnson. So I
Yeah.
brought up on the tweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus that weird corner. That guy who was like such a little like Napoleon complex kind of guy.
Oh, Cortland Finnegan.
Cortland Finnegan. Yeah.
Yeah, Cortland Finnegan. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't mind the fights. I like seeing, just like you do, the New York Giants show that because I feel like they really needed to show it. They didn't really have that as much last season during this time of year. So I'm glad that they matched a very physical team's toughness and was able to really stick up for themselves whenever push came to shove. But I don't want to see anybody get in, but no one did, So
yeah, no injuries and no the punching just to me is not really worth it at all. But luckily, Neighbors didn't get hurt, and the other for their side, they didn't get hurt. Let's keep it on the offense. I have a few more questions I want to go over on offense. I saw in your report that it continues to be, this is good news, by the way, at least for me and you who believe in his ability to add explosive plays already in year one. Tyrone Tracy getting a lot of first team reps.
Yeah,
I'm very intrigued by that.
A lot of Devin Singletary, a lot of Tyrone Tracy. Dante Miller will work in for a couple plays here and there. I'm not certain if I saw Eric Gray because it might have just been second team. Gray did have a 15-yard catch on a screen, and then he finished physically through a Lions defensive back along the sideline. Today's practice on offense, it was a lot of quick screens, it was a lot of runs, and it was a lot of play action rollouts. That's kind of what they focused on more so than just stretching the field vertically. Although when those shots were there, Daniel Jones pulled the trigger and connected with Malik Nabers like we saw. Another thing, Dan, saw two, and they weren't consecutive, but they were very close together. Screens to Wan'Dale Robinson, where he was the number 2 receiver, and he's running back towards the line of scrimmage. And basically the objective is for Robinson to catch this football, and then Andrew Thomas is kicking out into space. This is 2 practices in a row now where Andrew Thomas is being used creatively in space on a pin pull concept as part of the pass. So Wan'Dale Robinson can maneuver his diminutive frame through a bunch of traffic with big 78 blocking. So something to monitor. Hope we get to see that in the regular season because, dude, Wan'Dale was hurt and he was a rookie in 2022. So he wasn't really showcased too often like this. And then last year, Andrew Thomas was hurt. So the Giants didn't really kick him out into space all that often. So I think that could be a nice little counter punch depending on how defenses are playing for this Giants offense.
And if you look at some of the best offenses in the NFL from a schematic standpoint, a lot of them have weaponized movers in the offensive line. The Lions offense, I've seen some unbelievable breakdowns of plays where Penei Sewell's out there on the outside making plays using athleticism. The 49ers, oh my God, they use Trent Williams like a weapon in their offense. The Eagles obviously did this a lot as well. Giants don't really have, in my mind, many weapons on the offensive line, but they have one weapon on the offensive line, Andrew Thomas. And I actually kind of feel like Neal, if he ever could get it down, would be a weapon in space. But it's just like we haven't seen that. But we did see it a little bit. Remember his rookie season? We saw a couple of those plays, and I remember breaking them down with you on tape where he did get out in space. But Thomas is a lock. If he's fully healthy, he can get out in space and be a weapon for your screen game. So, man, one day, we've talked about it a while, but one day we will see an effective screen game for the Giants. Hopefully it's this year.
I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to enter a parallel universe or go through some elaborate labyrinth just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. It's easy to switch to. The website has a good interface. I have a couple buddies who have recommended this to me. They speak highly of Mint Mobile. Get started. Go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That is 3 Bs. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. Plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. 3 B's, triple B. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System. I didn't watch much of the 7-on-7 period. I think Jalen Hyatt had 1 catch there. Haven't seen too much of Jalen Hyatt in these 2 practices, but I was more focused on the offensive line one-on-ones, which are always a good time.
We're going to get to that in a moment. That was actually the next thing I was going to get to. So let's first, here's how we'll do this because it's going to lead to a larger discussion, but I would rather do the micro first and the macro second. So the micro will be what you saw today in these one-on-ones, and then we'll get to my macro question. So let's just do micro first. Tell me about anything you saw from any of these one-on-one battles. Giants O-line. We'll get to the defense later, but Giants O-line versus Detroit D-line.
The Giants offensive line played well. Now, they didn't win every single rep, and I'm more so referring to just the first team. There were times where Aiden Hutchinson was going up against like Joshua Mills or Joshua Miles, and like he was going to win. But Jermaine Illuminor did a good job against Aiden Hutchinson, Andrew Thomas against Marcus Davenport, and Davenport was able to cross inside. But in most protections, if you do that, you're running into John Runyon. And these are one-on-ones. And Andrew Thomas, I'm more so looking at how he reacts, how he adapts. And you could see Marcus Davenport initially won 1 rep against Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas just sunk his sips, got his feet in the ground, and just drove Marcus Davenport into where the guard would have been. So Andrew Thomas, not worried about that at all. I felt like John Runyon had 2 phenomenal reps. His third, which I did not capture on camera, wasn't as good. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Aleem McNeil, ended up separating from Runyon. Runyon did defeat Aleem McNeil a little bit earlier on. Greg Van Roten, another player who has like a lot of lower body flexibility, can absorb power well. Felt like he also played well. And then as for the guard, I thought Aaron Stinney showed anchor and stopped a couple of the pass rushes from Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike. So all in all, the first team I was pleased with. Now, Josh Azudu got beat a couple times by 41, that bendy edge that they have, but he didn't even look all that terrible. So from the one-on-one standpoint, I don't think the Giants came off looking too bad or anything like that from the offensive perspective.
Was DJ Reader in today or still not in?
No, I didn't see him out there.
Okay, interesting. I don't know what's going on with that situation. Probably some veterans rest or something along those lines.
I think he's out.
Is he out with an injury? That might be what it is.
I mean, that's what the our lads said.
Okay. And look, I mean, that I was just thinking about it because that's a wild interior. Him and Aleem McNeil. I didn't even really put 2 and 2 together. The Lions have that with Hutchinson. They really have a good setup going, the Lions, from a roster standpoint, man, as far as this season goes, with that D line, those linebackers behind them, and then that offense with Ben Johnson. So it's very interesting. And I'm really happy to hear that the Giants have been able to maybe not play their best today, but day 1 was pretty competitive. They were right there with the Lions. And day 2, not as good, but not like getting blown out by this team or worked by this team. Now, as far as those one-on-one drills go, sorry, do you want to jump in?
I was just going to add something, but we'll go over that in the red zone drill.
Okay.
Yeah.
As far as the one-on-one drills go, that's the micro. Let's get to the macro for a second here, because, I mean, on an overall basis, from my vantage point, from talking to you, from what you've seen in practice, from what I've seen in the video, and shout out to all the people taking videos, by the way. I've seen a lot, man. Like, there are 2 people, and I want to shout them out, but Giant Take Podcast, I think, is one of them. So shout out to you, Giant Take Podcast. And there's another one with a similar name that I'm sorry if I can't remember right now, but I'll get there. And these 2 people are just posting tons of videos throughout training camp. So I've seen a lot. But from my vantage point, Nick, it's one-on-ones and the team drills. It seems to me like Jermaine Illuminor is doing a pretty good job holding his own against Aiden effing Hutchinson. Just think about that for a second. Jermaine Illuminor holding his own against Aiden Hutchinson. Evan Neal, no real evidence of him holding his own against anyone, let alone Aiden Hutchinson. What's going to happen now at this right tackle position? And I put this on Twitter. Is the writing already on the wall? Like, at this point,
yes,
you think it's a done deal?
Yes, Jermaine Illuminor is going to be the starting right tackle. He's going to start there, and unless he falls on his face and absolutely sucks, which I don't envision, I think he has a floor of being a slightly below average starting offensive tackle, and he has a ceiling of being a slightly above average offensive tackle. And that's all I'm freaking asking for from Jermaine Illuminor. So unless he falls on his face, I don't believe Evan Neal is going to be playing right tackle for the New York Giants this season. Or
so is Evan Neal going to be playing at all?
I think he's going to be trained at guard eventually.
Well, we'll see what happens with that if that's the case. If he eventually gets on the field, and I think a lot of this, Nick, will probably come down to when he gets on the field.
So today, him and Jalen Mills were going really hard on the training bike. So I don't know what that's worth, okay, because he's not putting his 360 pounds of pressure onto the ground to really test that ankle. But he was going like hard to the point where he got off and he's like drenched in sweat. And he was off with one of the assistant strength coaches doing that. So I was taking some notes, just watching him and Mills go really hard. Maybe that indicates that they could be closer rather than further away. But with Neal, we haven't heard anything positive about him. So I think I'm just kind of grasping at anything positive. And I'm doing that for a player who's not even that great and a player who I believe is going to be usurped by Jermaine Illuminor. I believe that's more than likely already happened. I don't know if I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but I don't think that's a wild take. And I'm sure a lot of people at training camp agree.
It's probably not a wild take. I think at this point, most Giants fans not only believe in this take, Nick, but if it's up to them, this is it. Like, they don't even want to consider Evan Neal at any point. They're done with Evan Neal. And I think from the Giants standpoint, that might be a little short-sighted personally. Not to say you should win that right tackle job back right away, But they got to figure out a plan for Evan Neal, because I'll tell you what, if this team doesn't improve overall and doesn't take a step forward in winning football games unrelated to Evan Neal, you're going to look back at the end of the season. You're going to say this GM basically burned a 7th overall pick. You cannot win Super Bowls if you're just throwing out 7th overall picks left and right. The last GM threw out countless first-round picks. DeAndre Baker, Kadarius Toney. That's 2 in a short period of time. And I don't really know I guess he got a lot out of Barkley, a 2nd overall pick, I guess. And the rest of his first-round picks, I guess that's something. He was good on the field, but he played running back, and they didn't win any games with him ever at all. I guess he was a big part of 2022. I kind of think it was more great coaching, great scheme on offense, and great stops on defense. And he made some explosive plays early in the season. Down the stretch, not as much. Look back at the 2022 season. You'll see down the stretch, most of the Giants' offense was scheme and Daniel Jones stepping up. Les Barkley, he averaged 3.7 down the stretch of 2022. So, if that's his season that he won games for the team, that's the cap and that's the ceiling. So we got to get more out of this first round capital. It's hard to win if you're just throwing out 7th overall picks.
That 2022 draft, Dan, that's not the only pick that's basically, I don't want to say a wasted roster spot at this point, but it's all right, who are these players?
You're talking about Azudu and Flott?
Yeah.
Azudu, who knows what's going on with that at this point. That's, 3 of their first 4 picks in that class. 7th overall is the one that I'm still focused most on, though, Nick. That kind of capital is where you get Garrett Wilson, Drake London, players that we would love to have alongside Malik Nabers right now, right? And that's just going with the skill guys. There were plenty of other players in that class who did well. Even if you want to go and I think he was in this class, you can correct me if I'm wrong, even as stupid as this sounds, but say it was Tyler Linderbaum, which you would never do at 7th overall. We'd be great. That would be awesome. That'd be better than Evan Neal right now. This dude's been a great center so far in the NFL for the Ravens. So it's it's at the point, Nick, where it's that in my mind, the plan can't just be Evan Neal, you're back, you're on the bench. In my mind, it has to be what you said earlier. It has to be the transition to guard starts now. Let's see if you can potentially win this job, which is going to be hard enough, of course, with Greg Van Roten in the mix and getting all these reps. Though I guess it could be a situation where Greg Van Roten's training at center, and he's kind of at the same stage as Neal is at once they finally both get to play guard, and maybe they can both compete for one spot.
Honestly, at this point, Dan, injuries are going to happen.
Right.
It's a good situation to be. I mean, it's a terrible situation to be in, but it's also a good situation to be in, depending on your perspective.
Long term, it's bad. Short term, it's good, I think, is the fair way to go about that. Because long term, and it's not bad long term from a sense of you're getting your best players on the field. It's bad long term from you need to get something out of the 7th overall pick. I'm very strict on that. Can't just be burning 7th overall picks.
Look, I still think you could get something. I'm not completely
me too.
I know
you are not done with this guy. Yeah. I know a lot of fans are just done with this dude. And I'm well, he's had 2 seasons. He's been injured almost every snap of both seasons. Can I get an 8-game sample size of him fully healthy to judge if I really want to be done with this guy who's 6'7", 330, and was an amazing high school tackle, an amazing college tackle, and basically number 1 on the Cowboys draft, number 2 on the Cowboys draft board overall, and obviously high on the Giants draft board. Just to me, it's just, I don't like to call people busts. With Flowers, I felt like it was different, Nick, because you could just tell that even when they took him late round 1, it was a bit of a reach there. Neal didn't feel like a reach at the time.
Flowers was early round 1. But
was he early? Oh, yeah, he was supposed to go late round 1, and they took him early.
And I'll say this too, and I know Giant fans probably don't want to hear this, and I wasn't in the media room at this time, but I've talked with Ed and a bunch of people who have been on the beat. There is a stark difference between Eric Flowers and Evan Neal from a work ethic standpoint,
right?
From a personability standpoint. Evan Neal will put the work in to better himself, whereas Eric Flowers really did not. And Eric Flowers is putting his hands on reporters, and Eric Flowers is a malcontent. And Eric Flowers
trained with his own guy and refused to train with
there was a lot there with Eric Flowers. Evan Neal's not that guy. I know he had a bad moment with the burger flipper thing, and we give him, we jibe him for that, rightfully so. But he doesn't seem to be that guy. But at this point, the Giants need to go forward with Jermaine Illuminor, in my opinion, at right tackle.
Yes.
Evaluate it later, because Jermaine Illuminor against Aiden Hutchinson in those one-on-ones, he was meeting him up the arc. Aiden Hutchinson would land the rip move. And when Aiden Hutchinson lands that rip move, he can turn that corner. He's not the most bendy edge rusher, but he can do that. And Jermaine Illuminor is strong enough with that outside, that catch hand, to just stop him in his tracks and then force Aiden Hutchinson to tempt the bend and then eventually lose his momentum. Jermaine Illuminor will force these edge rushers, like really good ones like Aiden Hutchinson, to have their best rep in order to win, like a 95th percentile type of rep, whereas Evan Neal was losing to 70 percentile type of reps.
Right.
I'm saying, so that's a huge difference.
Yes. And let me make it clear. I am in this camp that apparently most fans and you seem to be in. I want Jermaine Illuminor to be the starting right tackle. I think he's earned it. I think he deserves it. I think the point being, I've seen a lot of bad Evan Neal in the NFL. I haven't seen a lot of bad Illuminor at right tackle in the NFL. And he deserves this job. It's just a matter of then figure it out. Figure out what to do with Neal, because he played guard at Alabama and he played it well at Alabama. So you need to figure out if he's going to be a better guard than Greg Van Roten, who's 35 years old. You know what I mean? Like, or if John Michael Schmitz can get back, because that needs to be in play. It needs to be an option at the very least, because I would like to see Evan Neal still succeed as a Giant. And I'm just not ready to give up and say, well, guaranteed Greg Van Roten's going to be a better guard than Evan Neal, 34-year-old Greg Van Roten. If he is, God bless him. And he should start for the Giants too. You have to put the best guys on the field. We need to see what this offense can look like with a competent offensive line. That's all obvious, but just throwing Neal to the wayside, it's not where I'm at. It's not where you at. And I know some fans are there, but I doubt Joe Shane, for starters, is there. Maybe Brian Dable will be there. That's the question, their divide, because we see that a lot with GM and coach when it comes to these high draft picks. The GM can say all he wants, but he needs to make that work. Like, for Joe Shane's sake, if the Giants don't improve and become a playoff team this year, and Evan Neal's a total bust and considerable cut by the end of going into this offseason, it's going to be a bad look for Shane. That's all I know.
Yeah, that's 100% certain. We did get to see kickoff period, Dan,
okay,
which was pretty sweet. Again, one-on-ones for the New York Giants. Felt like the offensive line did well. They went into the kickoff period, and we saw a combination of Ayer Asante and Gunnar Olszewski being that first team. Now, I'm not going to read too far into it. I don't think Ayer Asante has a high percentage chance to make this roster. I think there's probably, and Brian Dable intimated this before practice, that Gunnar Olszewski and Isaiah McKenzie are basically battling for a roster spot. And then Brian Dable also said Isaiah McKenzie he's very close with him on and off the field. So he has a really tight relationship with him. Gunnar Olszewski, though, is somebody who is making plays as a receiver with the second and third team. And he had a long kickoff return as well in the kickoff drills today. So I think they just put Asante back there because they're probably going to use him in this game because he is a roster bubble type of player. But I think it is important to note the players who were out there on kickoff blocking. Now, of course, the rule is completely different, but those players were Daniel Bellinger, Theo Johnson, Chris Manhertz, Matthew Adams, who has a shot to make this roster as a special teamer, Bryce Ford-Wheaton, Drew Phillips, Isaiah Simmons, Darius Muasau, and Miles Boykin, who also has a shot to make this team as a special teams player. So I wanted to highlight that, and there were other combinations that were being used. Dante Miller and Isaiah McKenzie was the second. We also saw Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Jacob Salyers, who was obviously a roster camp body type of player at this point. But Dante Miller had a freaking phenomenal return. He had a great run up the sidelines that he may have stepped out of bounds on, but you could just see the difference in speed when he accelerated up the sideline past a cornerback who took a bad angle and then a safety who took a bad angle. So I wanted to bring up the special teams period and then tie it into the quality practices that Dante Miller had and Gunnar Olszewski, who had a deep touchdown on a cross where he outran a linebacker and a safety. And Gunnar also took 2 or 3 punches to the face in a drill. Yeah. And he didn't retaliate. He led, he was Dan Schneier's favorite player there. He just didn't retaliate.
I don't mind retaliating. Just get into the grapple, take him to the ground, grapple, take to the ground. Don't punch at a helmet. That's the only thing I'm saying with that regard. I will say this. One extra benefit of the Giants making this transition away from a one-back system into a multi-back system and going by committee is that you can find gems now. You can rely on your scouting. You can rely on your GM to find you gems. And a guy like Dante Turbo Miller could end up being a gem, a diamond in the rough that they located, that they found, that we would have never found in the last 4 years because they could look good in practice, all they want. But Barkley was on the field. I saw something yesterday in a fantasy podcast. I heard something about how just the percentage of snaps Barkley had last year. And it wasn't even as high as the year before, which is insane to say. And it was like a number that only 2 other backs had in the NFL. It's going to look totally different this year. Singletary ain't going to be that dude. So now there's opportunities to find this diamond in the rough potential and actually see it on the field in the regular season where it actually matters. And that's when you could find, oh, wow, we may have found something with Miller to the point where we can keep him on the roster and he may be part of our future plans. And who knows if Corbin could have been that guy before all his injuries. If Corbin was on the roster this year and he was showing out in camp and he actually got a chance to play these last few years, we'll never know those types of things. We may get to know that with Miller, and we may get to know that early with Tracy. When we went to earlier, if we had re-signed Barkley, Tyrone Tracy, maybe they would have drafted him, but maybe we wouldn't have seen him in year one. So I'm excited to finally see some new backs in the system, man, and see what they can do, because I believe running back is a position that you can find talent at all across the spectrum, from UDFA to round 5 to round 3 to round 1.
And if we're discussing these fringe roster guys, there is another player at the wide receiver position who has been making plays with Drew Lock in the second team. And I think he might be in line to steal a roster spot away from one of the slight Big Blue banter favorites. And it is Allen Robinson over Isaiah Hodgins, man.
Might happen.
I know. And Allen Robinson, man, he had a deep touchdown on a nifty. This was the red zone drill. We'll go over it a little bit separately, but I want to talk about this specific play. It was a play action pass where Drew Lock faked like he handed it off, and then he kind of did that like little like trot for like a half a second, like he didn't have the football, but the football was tucked behind his leg, and then he rolled out fast. And on a deep corner route, we had Allen Robinson right by the back pylon. Beautiful pass by Drew Lock, laid it right in there. Allen Robinson brought it down, and then earlier in practice, there was a deep crosser from the backside hit by Drew Lock, again, off of a play action rollout to Allen Robinson that went for maybe 15, 20 yards. And yesterday's practice, I was watching the defense, but Ed was telling me that Allen Robinson was one of the standouts in the second team period again. So this is 2 practices in a row against the Detroit Lions where Allen Robinson is showing up. And I have not really seen a lot of a lot of Isaiah Hodgins making contested catches or really doing all that much on the offense other than blocking. So that's a battle, Allen Robinson, Isaiah Hodgins, that we have to pay attention to in the preseason games.
Yeah, and it brings up a great 30,000-foot view discussion on what is more valuable to the Giants receiving core, because the Giants receiving core, as it stands to me, Nick, is Jalen Hyatt, Malik Nabers, and Wan'Dale Robinson, potentially Slayton, as far as future of this core. So the question becomes, and I heard a great interview, or I read an article where, Hyatt spoke glowingly of just the nuances of playing the wide receiver position that have rubbed off on him getting to work with Allen Robinson. So now you got that guy in your meeting room for every regular season game and during the road trips and in all spots where you might need him on the sideline. Or is that, how valuable is that versus the value of cut him, keep Hodgins, and maybe at some point Hodgins can blossom into something long-term because of his age, versus obviously Allen Robinson being an older vet who's not going to be part of the long-term future in almost any regard. So that's the question the Giants have. It's like a short-term, long-term thing, and it's going to be an interesting decision that they have to come to there. I almost lean toward Robinson at this point, though I do like Hodgins' game, just because I do feel like the Giants are in a pretty good position at wide receiver from a long-term standpoint. Not to say they don't need a Hodgins type, but it just feels like right now they've set things up to where an Allen Robinson may be more valuable to them for the veteran purposes, for just the nuances to playing the position that he can have. That, look, Nabers, Wan'Dale, and Hyatt don't have a lot of NFL experience combined.
No.
It's just a matter of fact, the young receiver core. So having a vet may help.
Darius Slayton is the veteran if Allen Robinson is not on this team. And if you look at the cornerback and the safety room, there's really no veteran there. Jalen Mills, hopefully he can get back and be healthy, but it's a young team at some really core positional groups for the Giants. And Allen Robinson, if he could still ball, which he's proven on second team, at least against the Lions and against the Giants secondary, possibly there's a spot for him. I think it's going to be a heated competitive battle between those two.
And I know you had a chance to focus on the offense today. I doubt you charted what I'm about to ask you, so maybe it'll just go by your memory. But give me an idea of how the tight end rep shook out with the first team today and the second and third teams.
Yeah, so Lawrence Cager did not practice today. He was off on the side. Saw Chris Manhertz out there on a lot of running downs, 12 personnel. Theo Johnson,
okay.
I would say.
Wait, hold on. You're talking about downs with Jones or downs without Jones?
Jones is the only quarterback to take first team reps.
Oh, okay. I didn't know we were exclusively talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so on first team for now.
Yeah. So It's been Manhertz, Theo, and then Daniel does work in as well. But there's a lot of Theo Johnson.
Who would you say has the most reps? Hard to say.
A little hard to say. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would probably lean Theo.
But no real distinction. It's probably just by a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So Daniel Bellinger, they're using him in a specific role. They like having him off the line of scrimmage a little bit. H-back. He will play Y as well, but it does seem like Theo is earning a lot of those. And then Manhurts is earning those as well.
Okay.
Now with Daniel, they like using him at fullback too, whenever they go into those types of formations. Bellinger, though, is also earning third team reps. So he's being used on like all three teams. And that's
pretty odd that he would get 13 reps at this point.
Yeah, it's not an indictment on Daniel Bellinger. Jack Stoll isn't there to take on those snaps.
Right, that's the key.
Is 35 years old. Lawrence Cager isn't there. So who else is going to get it?
This tight end room to me seems very uncertain from a snap share standpoint, regular season games wise. I mean, like there seems to be a possibility that Theo Johnson might get more reps than we expected in year one. And I'll tell you what, man, watching him run a route yesterday's practice that he got over the middle on, I think it was with Jones. He's just a massive target there when he's running those crossing routes in the middle of the field. Like you have such a big window to throw him the football into. And Jones was able to put the ball high and allow for like a hands catch for Theo. And I'm just like, damn, if you're looking for a way to get those passes over that second level, but in between that third level of defenders and have a target radius that's really allows you as a quarterback to just throw a tall ball and put a lot of zip on it, he's kind of the guy that's going to do it. Like he's just an athletic freak and he's a size freak. And not to knock Bellinger or Cager or Manhurts, but none of them are as tall and lengthy as this dude.
Yeah, and he's just really thick, like with multiple C's, like a lot of C's. Like he's got thick hips, thick legs, thick lower body, thick torso. He's a really big guy, and he was getting physical in today's practice against the Lions. Yeah, so it was good to see. Onto that red zone period. That's the period that I saw. So basically, they go into one side of the field instead of two, and they go Lions offense against Giants defense, and then Giants offense against Lions defense. So they do it like that. So you're able to see both units. It was pretty rough for the Giants defense in that period. Now, Dexter Lawrence was not out there, but the first 6 plays, there were 3 touchdowns.
3 of 6 touchdowns, and that's not good for the Giants.
It was not great. Yeah.
The Montgomery one looked weird. He looked wide open on that one, but I couldn't obviously.
Yeah. So it was a play action. It was a play action rollout to the offense's right. Jared Goff starts rolling out to the right. Montgomery just leaked out and wheeled up the left sideline, and Banks was reducing on a tight end who was running a deep crossing route. Banks lost his assignment, which would have been that deep third, but it was a good job by Goff to set up and then just throw it back to Demont. Demont ended up catching it. 2 plays later, Amon-Ra St. Brown over the middle of the field, touchdown, and then they brought the ball back to the 10-yard line, and Jahmyr Gibbs, after one run that was stopped well by Micah McFadden and Deontay Banks, Jahmyr Gibbs hit the A gap right off like Jordan Riley and just like went right into the end zone for an easy touchdown. So it was like, damn, dude, that was quick and that was kind of ugly, and it looked like the Giants were getting pushed around in that period. Now, I don't think that was indicative of the entire practice. I didn't watch the Giants defense, but it doesn't seem like that was indicative of the entire practice. According to Ed, some of his notes, the Giants were able to shore up some of their communication errors that they had from yesterday. I think there was one really bad blown coverage, and watching a lot of these practices, knowing that Tyler Nubin has come back, knowing that there has been communication errors, I have to imagine, Dan, that Tyler Nubin is going to be inserted into the starting lineup. Like, are we just going to sit here this entire time? Like, I like Dane Belton, right? But Tyler Nubin is the Xavier McKinney replacement. Yes. Shane Bowen praised this guy.
In Hard Knocks, he said this guy's going to be able to play for us year one. A lot of snaps year one. He literally said it to us.
It's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Sure. Tyler Nubin's NFL ready. And, you know, I remember Trevor Sycamore, who we've had on twice on this show, had him as a first-round grade and had him as his number 1 safety. Nick Saban had him as his number 1 safety in this class. I believe it was Saban. And so there's a lot of good minds that believe this guy is ready to contribute right away. So that's definitely coming, Nick. I will say this about the red zone offense. 2 things to keep in mind. One, the Lions, again, were one of the best offenses in the NFL the past 2 years. Like, the Giants are literally, it doesn't seem like it. They don't have Mahomes. They don't have Josh Allen or Burrow. But by the numbers, by the scoring numbers, the Lions actually are the best offense in football over the last 2 years on a points per game basis. And you can call it what you want. A lot of it to me is having Ben Johnson as OC, but even more so having that offensive line, Ragnow, Sewell, Decker, the 2 guards. Like, and now they have, don't they have our boy Kevin Zeitler on this line now too?
Yeah, so he didn't practice.
I'm sure he's not practicing much. He's like 30, whatever. But like,
well, he practiced yesterday, but he had something going on. There were a couple guys who were out.
Yeah, he's gonna get vet days.
Yeah, Emmanuel Mosley, I think, tore his pec in yesterday's practice, so he's down for a while for the Lions. They lost a couple guys for practice today heading into this joint practice.
But yeah, so I mean, look, it's a great offense. And then two, let's be real about this, Nick, because we know this from watching the tape. If the Giants lose Dexter Lawrence for an extended period of time, that's probably their biggest loss in my mind. It's him or Thomas in my mind, or Nabers now. But I think it's Dex, man. I mean, we haven't seen it. We'll see. We'll see. It seems like it would be, but I think they're just not the same. Maybe from a ceiling standpoint, it's Tom. Sorry. From a floor standpoint, I would agree with you. It's Thomas. From a ceiling standpoint, I think it's Lawrence.
We should do an entire podcast on the top 5 most indispensable players on the New York Giants. Yeah. Because I think there are sound arguments, and this sounds crazy, that Dex might not even be 2. I don't know, though. Like,
I really believe he's 1. I
think he could be 1, but I think you can at least make an argument that he's not. That doesn't mean that he isn't.
Yeah, we haven't seen him off the field. That's the biggest thing. Like we did see against the Eagles though in the division round 2 years ago when he was on and in various snaps throughout the last 2 seasons. When he wasn't on the field, teams just ripped the Giants apart. And
there's just not a lot of depth too behind him because you want DJ Davidson.
But obviously, it's like, what the hell would they do at left tackle? If Andrew Time, then it's like Evan Neal, step back up, buddy. You're back in, buddy. You're our left tackle now, and it's like, wait a second, he's actually good at left tackle the whole time. He just couldn't set to the right side. No, that's probably not going to happen.
Now look at Deontay Banks. You got Bobby Okereke, Malik Nabers, all those players. And I love how we haven't even brought up the quarterback, but all of those players are also very indispensable. And it's not necessarily that they're better football players than Dexter Lawrence. And I'm not saying that Dexter Lawrence isn't as valuable or isn't as indispensable as those players, but there's at least arguments because there's not a lot of depth behind those players. Like if you had to have Micah McFadden be your core starting linebacker, that's a problem. Deontay Banks, not on this roster. Who the hell is covering CeeDee Lamb? Nick McLeod is your cornerback 1 by far. That's not good. Like, so it's just a lack of depth on the Giants. And that's why the range of outcomes for the Giants, it's vast, right? Like you're hoping that they're going to be better than next year. But if they suffer 1 or 2 injuries to 6 or 7 players on this roster, it could just completely derail this entire team because that vulnerability could be gravely exploited by whoever the Giants are playing against.
You're right about that. It'll take time, I think, to build out depth on this roster. They really didn't inherit any. Actually, they didn't inherit any depth at all from the last GM, who didn't inherit any depth at all from the GM before him. So it was 2 horrific stints, and not horrific. I want to make it clear. Part of Jerry Reese's GM tenure was good. The end of Jerry Reese's tenure was horrific, and that is a good way to describe what it was at the end. Because it was Flowers, Apple, and Ingram back to back to back. That is as bad as it gets in round 1. Passing up guys like TJ Watt, Ryan Ramczyk, and the like. But sorry, go ahead.
Let's be honest. There was a contentious atmosphere in New York with Jerry Reese and Tom Coughlin.
Yeah, that sucked too. Yeah, at the end.
They were just guys who were just on scholarship and who just would be on the roster no matter what because Jerry Reese drafted them and Tom Coughlin just wouldn't play them.
Went away with it, yeah.
Because Tom Coughlin didn't think they were worthy of a roster spot. So there was such a disconnect between the front office at that time period during the tail end of the Jerry Reese years. And the Giants are still suffering from that right now. The Giants have not recovered from that disconnect. And it's a freaking shame. And we're hoping that it can be rectified now with Dable and Shane, but it's not necessarily a certainty after last season's disaster. Trying to be optimistic while remaining objective, but there's still a lot of question marks with this team.
And I am getting a lot more optimistic, I got to be honest, about the Giants than I ever was. Just seeing this Nabers effect, it's really made me a lot more optimistic than I thought I would be, because I just think watching Jones with him, I'm like, this might be exactly what Jones needed to play competent football on a consistent basis, which is all the Giants could hope for at this point. In my mind, at this point in his career, it's year 6. I think competent, consistent is just what I'm hoping for. Anyone who thinks he's going to be an elite quarterback, like top 3, top 5 in the NFL, that's your prerogative and that's your right. I personally don't see that ceiling for him at all, no matter what the Giants had on the roster. And I think it's very fair to say that that's unrealistic to expect, but that's not what we need. And so at this point, back to what you said, though, just to circle it back, like there's a reason why, what's his name comes in. I'm forgetting his name now after Ozzie Newsome, the Ravens new DaCosta. And it's like, now DaCosta's amazing. He's doing a great job. Well, part of that is what you just said. He inherited such a strong infrastructure there from Ozzie Newsome, both in players and roster and just in process, like you said, in the connection. So now the Giants need to just get that. I feel like they're kind of building that with Dable and Shane, but it's going to take a step back if Evan Neal is a total bust. I'm just going to be honest with the situation.
Well, of
like,
course.
and if Azudu busts out and Flop busts out and, on and on and on, like when you start to build, because the draft is your main core as a GM, you can do everything you want in free agency and find these guys like Hodgins and Pinnock, and it helps and it's important, but you need those assets you get in the draft are infallible. Those are the invaluable assets that you will never get back. You get 1 or 2 a year, 1, 2, 3 a year. So those are the ones that really will define the GM in my mind. But yeah.
So a couple other notes before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Elijah Chapman is somebody who's worked in with the first team. He's, again, short, explosive off the snap. Him and Ryder Anderson in second team drills had a sack of Hendon Hooker, who ran the second team drills for the Lions, at least in the red zone period, where Nate Sudfeld ran with a third team today. They've been alternating. We also had Azeez Ojulari had a kind of a rough day. He jumped off sides on one snap, and then in the one-on-ones against Dan Skipper, who was giving it to the New York Giant fans. It was pretty funny. I'll go through that in a second. He got absolutely buried like into the deck by Dan Skipper. That's not a great sign from Azeez Ojulari, who isn't the most physical. He's more of a finesse and more of an explosive type of pass rusher. But Dan Skipper was giving it to the New York Giants fans, who just were relentless talking crap to the Lions. It was actually really funny. And Skipper was just like, why are you guys like, why aren't you playing then? Like, why can't you play? Like, why are you on that side of the fence? Did you pay to come here? And I'm like, oh God, boys, geez, just trying to taunt these dudes. And I'm just like, oh my God, what's going on, New York? Like, it was a very New York, New Jersey moment of just hubris and bombastic obscenities being thrown at these Detroit Lion players.
It's funny. I can't knock the Giants fans for having that kind of passion. I'm excited about that. I love it. And I am excited about this roster as we move forward, mostly because of Malik Nabers. I'm going to be honest. It really feels like he's single-handedly changing my perspective of what this team can be in 2024. Because I just, again, seeing against the Giants DBs is one thing. Seeing against the Lions DBs is another thing. I'm excited to see it against Sauce Gardner. And I'm excited to see how far along and how fast it's come. Right? Like, I wasn't sure. We've seen Kadarius Toney take a long time. We've seen Jalen Hyatt take a long time, really his full rookie season. Now he's finally starting to get really worked into this offense on a consistent basis. Take receivers a long time in this offense to pick it up. But Nabers, man, it seems like he's picked it up fast and to the point where they're designing their whole offense around this guy.
Yeah, and that's what I hoped that you would do for your sixth over. Dude, there have been wide receivers, though, Dan, who
doesn't always happen
in the top 10, and it's just like 3 years later,
right?
They dividend.
Drake London still hasn't been an offense, hasn't been designed.
That's more of an offensive thing, but yes, I think
sure, but that's what we're saying though. Like,
I'm thinking more.
I'm
thinking more like Corey Davis.
Oh, just busts, yeah.
And White, the kid from the
John
Chicago
Ross
Bears.
was a 9th overall pick.
John Ross, like players.
There's plenty of examples, honestly. Yeah, that's more on the talent. That I felt like the talent was Nabers, but Nabers was always undeniable, and I know you agree with that. But it's just I wasn't sure that they were going to get it down in year one, like it seems like they are, and just has me a lot more excited about the future of this team. Because look back at the last 2 seasons, Nick. It's been the offense that's held the Giants back. Last year was historically bad. 2 years ago wasn't that much better.
Dude, what if this year it's the defense, though?
Right. Yeah. Then it's like, honestly, though, if it's the defense, I'm going to be sad that we didn't make the playoffs and that we didn't push forward in that regard. But overall, if you give me a year on its surface, Nick, would I rather have a good offensive year or defensive year? I'm taking the offensive year every single time, personally. Same. Also, for our sake, I would just rather watch good offensive tape than good defensive tape. That's just me.
I agree. I do love defense, though. But at least the Giants' offense, if they are good, let's just say they are, they're scoring points, which will allow the strengths of the Giants' defense to be fixed. If the Giants' defense remains healthy, of course. The pass rush is what I'm referring to.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not as worried. We'll see what happens, but I'm not as worried about the Giants' run defense. I just feel like Shane Bowen schematically does a good job to take stuff away in the run game. Well, it's really just
that's why Okereke is so indispensable.
Right.
Like, if Okereke is not there, and Shane Bowen said it,
then you can get worried. Yeah,
like very worried. Who's playing linebacker? Micah McFadden and Deontay Johnson. I like Deontay Johnson.
Yeah,
Darius Muasau.
The Giants have been in this position before too, where they've had to put like Jalen Smith in there and things like that. So Yeah, it'd be good for the argument that we may eventually have, the debate we may eventually have of who's the dispensable rankings. Be a fun one to do. We should do it coming up. Not now, once things settle down before the season. But thank you to everybody again for tuning in to Big Blue Banter. That's 2 days in a row from Giants practice. Thank you to Nick Filato for being there and relaying all these observations. Obviously, for the rest of us, we will wait for the first preseason game on Thursday, where we're gonna see some stuff. I'll say this: we may not get what we want, or not what we want, but we may not get a lot of the starters, Nick. But we're going to get to evaluate a lot of the players we've discussed in the last month, especially the last few weeks. And we're going to get actual game film on them, so we're going to get to watch them play real snaps. So I'm excited to just watch them tape.
Same here, Dan.
And that's all we got. Thank you again. Remember, I should be saying this at the beginning. Somebody pointed this out in the comments. I didn't. Please hit the like button. Last video, I think we got 5,000 views, but not a lot of likes. I would love to somehow turn that into a 5-to-1 ratio moving forward. 5 views for every 1 like, if that's possible. Don't know if it is possible, but if it is, please help us do that. The likes are going to help this channel grow. A lot of people I see in the comments say this on a consistent basis. I'm sure you've seen it too, Nick. Wow, this channel is amazing content. Why do they have so few subscribers? Well, I think part of that is we don't have a lot of likes on our videos. And I know this because I work in the industry, and I know from that standpoint I don't know fully, Nick. I don't know the total ins and outs of the algorithm that YouTube has, but I know a little bit about the algorithm. And it does rely on a lot of likes to boost this video to other people on YouTube. So please help us like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are watching this for the first time and enjoy it and want more content like this. And just know that this is not the cap from a content standpoint. When we get to the regular season, what we do and what we are known for is watching every snap on all 22. Nick has film, I have film, and delivering an analysis of the film, the X's and O's as to why things are happening. So that's coming in the regular season. So subscribe now and you'll see, and hit the bell button, and you'll get all of those videos the minute they drop. So that's my plug. I'm going to have to start doing this, Nick, at the beginning of the show, and remember to do it. But we want to get right into the content. But until then, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.